Thank you for tuning into the GSMC basketball podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Nelson, and I apologize for that late start. I was having a little bit of difficulty starting up with the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi was really slow on my end. It just wasn't connecting to my computer, so I apologize for the late start. But we'll still go ahead and do our segments as usual. So in the first segment, we are going to be talking about the Pistons firing Monty Williams, and this move just happened recently, and they just basically he was supposed to have 5 more years on his contract, like his coaching contract, but they just decided to part ways with him just off of the season that they had. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about that. Then we are going to go into the second segment where I also talk about Pascal Siakam signing that extension with the Indiana Pacers, because it is now said that he is expecting to sign with the Pacers coming this free agency. So just go ahead and talk a little bit about that and what that move means. And then I'm going to do something a little bit different. In the third, fourth, and fifth segment, I'm going to be going over all of the free agents. So I have 24 on this list right now, and I'm going to go over all 24 of these free agents and all the possibilities of where they could end up, what my opinions on them, how I felt that their season was. I have all of that, and that's basically going to be the third, fourth, and fifth segment. Now, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a pretty long segment. I wouldn't be able to fit all of those players in just one segment, so I just decided to make it all three of those segments. And I also plan on, in the future doing a I also plan on in the future doing a sort of recap of the season, like the regular season's best moments, maybe even the postseason's best moments, before the Olympics start. Let me know what you guys think of that in the comments. But before I begin with this first segment, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead and use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCPodcast.net. It really helps the show. It makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCPodcast.net. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and talking about the decision for the Pistons and firing Monty Williams. So as you guys know, the Pistons, they are notorious. Well, not really notorious. They're more infamous this season for having one of the worst records in the NBA amongst teams in the Eastern Conference. Because I say teams because the Wizards, they're like right there in being terrible amongst the Eastern Conference teams. But yes, the Pistons, they were arguably the worst team in the NBA this year. Again, arguably, because the Wizards are an extremely close second. And the Wizards, they were only one game apart from being the exact same record as the Pistons. The biggest difference is that the Pistons lost a record 28 straight games in a row, and it took them about almost like a month or two to win one game. It was really bad, and it was like a horrible time to be a Pistons fan. Everyone was just chanting. Everyone in the Pistons stands was chanting "Sell the team." Everyone was like, the prices for the Pistons games, they were so low because nobody wanted to even go to those games. It was just pain and misery all the way through. And on top of that, you had to deal with, if you were a Pistons fan, you had to deal with Monty Williams, and you had to deal with the fact that the organization was giving Monty Williams that much money to essentially just throw the franchise. Because his going from finals appearance to worst record in most consecutive losses in NBA history, it's not a good way to go out. And I think it's really unfortunate for the Pistons that on top of the team being really bad, they had a really incompetent coach. But then again, usually the coach's mindset and the coach's his methods, they reflect on the players and, their ability to play and their ability to hoop. So, that might also be part of it. But according to Woj, the Pistons, they're now going to make a head coaching change. Monty was again, like I said before, he was only one season into his 6-year, $785 million contract. So they essentially paid him 60-something million to do absolutely nothing. Now, they have to find... now, this could probably set back the Pistons for a while. And, he coached the Suns for a relatively long time, and the Suns were very, very... not very successful, but, they were definitely doing much better under his coaching staff and under his, up until he met Luka Doncic in the postseason. They were doing pretty well. And... then, obviously, he met Luka Doncic in the postseason, and they got absolutely owned at home, which was the biggest reason why he was fired. And, we see this happening with a lot of the coaches now. A lot of the coaches are getting fired the second they can't win a championship, given the situation that they're in. We see it happen with Doc Rivers all the time. You guys know I'm going to pick on him. We saw it recently happen with Darvin Ham, and we see it with Monty. We also saw it with Dwayne Casey when he was with the Raptors, and I believe he won Coach of the Year in I believe he won he won Coach of the Year in 2018. And despite winning Coach of the Year, he got swept in the second round again by the Cavs, and that caused the Toronto Raptors to fire him. But there is some context to that. There is a little bit of context that you have to think about. Some of the context is that, that team and the Raptors, they were the best team in the Eastern Conference, and it's they just could never really get it done against LeBron. It was literally only LeBron that they struggled against, and once LeBron had a weak team, it seemed like this was their chance to finally beat LeBron in the series, and they didn't do it. And because of that, the head coach was fired. And it doesn't help that, immediately after they get a new head coach and a new player, and they immediately win their first ever championship as a franchise. So we see this trend, it happens a lot, that if you're not successful in any way, shape, or form, that you just immediately get fired as a coach. But to be fair, not really to be fair, sort of to be understandable, Monty Williams and his rotation with the Pistons, they were absolutely horrible. They were arguably one of the worst things that came out of that coaching experience. The rotations. Now, excuse me. The Pistons, they opened the season losing 36 of their first 39 games, which is horrible. And this set a new single season record, which entered, as, most consecutive losses in a row. And this is absolutely horrible. And this is the worst winning percentage by an organization in, this is the worst winning percentage by the organization in its 76-year history. And on top of that, to make matters worse, they didn't even get the number 1 pick in the draft. Again, this was the second time in a row that they've gotten the 5th pick in the draft after having the worst record in the NBA. And it really shows that, in the NBA, you can't really afford to tank, because maybe tanking doesn't even work out for you in the end. The Pistons, they parted ways with Weaver earlier this offseason, replacing him with the new head of basketball operations, Trajan Langdon. Since Langdon's hiring, multiple reports indicated that the new president would be given free rein to make a head coaching change, despite the 65 million guaranteed in money left on Williams' deal. According to both Vince and Goodwill of Yahoo Sports, James L. Edwards of Athletic Gores made the final call on Williams within the last 24 hours. Langdon informed the veteran coach of the decision on Wednesday. Those reports don't explicitly state whether or not Langdon recommended a change to Gores. Still, either way, the new top front office executive in Detroit now has the opportunity to bring his own head coach for 2024 and 2025 and going into the future. So those are just, a little bit of extra details that, that should be noted with the rights on the coach and why, they were able to fire him despite the fact that they were that he was still going to be that he still had several other years under his contract. Now, the Pistons, they're going to join the Lakers and Cavs as teams seeking a new head coach, despite the fact that I did mention previously before that it seems like, JJ Redick is going to be the Lakers head coach. It's not officially confirmed by Woj yet. It was more so like it was leaked information. So there is still a verdict, but it's highly likely that JJ Redick is going to be the next head coach. Highly likely. I'm just going to say that off the bat. Now, the Pistons, they will so essentially they'll be joining the Cavs in seeking a new head coach. While those clubs, they've been conducting the searches for several weeks, Detroit is going to get a relatively late start compared to those other two teams when they were able to choose a coach. So we'll see what sort of timeline the team has in mind for making a hire. The draft is just 1 week away, while the Las Vegas summer schedule will get underway in July 12th. I might talk a little bit about the Summer League as well, depending on how popular actually, you know what? It's probably going to be pretty popular because Bronny's going to be in there. I'll definitely talk a little bit about Bronny if he does play in the Summer League. If he even gets drafted, we still have to see. Some of the candidates under consideration for the jobs in Los Angeles and Cleveland figured to be on the Pistons' radar. According to Goodwill, one notable name to watch is Pelicans associate head coach James Borrego, who is viewed as a legitimate contender for both the Lakers and the Cavs. Again, I have a feeling that the Lakers have already picked JJ Redick, and according to a tweet that came out, definitely, it's more or less at least confirmed to those reports that he's going to definitely be the head coach of the Lakers. But again, Woj did not confirm it yet, so I guess you can merely say, you could say that there are more speculations, but I really trust this source, and we'll just have to wait to see until it's completely till it's official. Now, let's go right ahead and get into the rest of the article. It's unclear whether Williams will become a contender for either of the NBA's other head coaching vacancies. So any of the other teams that need a head coach, it's not entirely certain if he's going to, assume the role of that head coaching position. I don't really see him as being a good coach for the Cavs. And, even if since we were talking about the Lakers, even if the Lakers were still searching for a coach, I don't see him as a good coach for the Lakers either. But, that's just me. Maybe that's just a little bit of the recency bias and the fact that the Pistons also aren't a relatively good team. It might also be clouding my judgment of how good this of a coach he actually is. But judging off of his rotations, no thanks. Now, with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and go into the second segment where we are going to be talking about Pascal Siakam. He's expected to sign an extension or a max contract with the Pacers. I'll go over the exact details of the contract after this break, so be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be talking about Pascal Siakam and him expecting to sign an extension with the Indiana Pacers. And before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCPodcast.net. It really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCPodcast.net. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and talk about Pascal Siakam and his new contract. Well, not really his new contract extension, because it was just a report that came out that was saying he is expecting to sign a contract with the Pacers. So, like, the Pacers and Siakam agree to a max contract. Like, that's the headline of this, even though, free agency hasn't started yet. Now, the Pacers, like this, according to this article, the Pacers, they made a splash ahead of 2024 NBA trade deadline, acquiring Pascal Siakam from the Toronto Raptors. Yes, that was definitely one of the best trades in the recent history of the NBA, and it resulted in an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, despite the fact that the Knicks were injured, and I don't think the Pacers should have made it all the way to begin with. They did make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and that's really that. They wouldn't have done it without Pascal Siakam, and that's his greatness and his ability to be a valuable asset on the offensive side of the ball should not be underestimated. So there was a little bit of a debate on whether or not he was going to be re-signed by the Pacers. It was all dependent on how well he played, but he definitely earned this contract that he got from the Pacers. The new NBA rules state that teams can negotiate contracts with their players once the NBA Finals are completed. So this doesn't violate any kind of tampering rules in the NBA, or like whatever you think it might violate. This isn't tampering. This is normal. The Pacers, they wasted no time getting to work with Pascal Siakam, as a new contract has been worked out. The two sides have agreed to a $189.5 million max contract that he intends to sign going into when free agency officially opens up. And once the NBA moratorium ends on July 6th, he can officially put pen to paper and seal the deal. In 41 regular season games with the Pacers, he averaged 21 points, 55% shooting, 39% from the three. Very, very efficient, was one of the best scorers on one of the best offenses in the NBA. The fastest pace offense in the NBA, without a doubt. And the biggest reason why they were able to, stay alive for a majority of the postseason, why they were able to stay alive for a majority of their regular season, was because of their elite defenses. And, just the fact that they were, not their elite defenses, excuse me, their elite offenses, my bad. Just the fact that they were able to constantly score, and the fact that they were constantly able to just outrun the defense that was, trying to get back. Like, they would be lazy trying to get back on defense, and when they get back on defense, it's like well, when they get back on defense, it's like, okay, they already have an open corner three. And what in the bye bye Monty, time to party. Yeah, I guess if you are a Pistons fan, it makes sense that you want to say goodbye to Monty, but it doesn't really matter. Like, the Pistons are still gonna lose a lot in the next season anyway, regardless of what coach they have. And I mean, that fifth pick that they got is gonna be very, very special, I'm sure. So, working out a long term deal with Siakam, it seemed obvious, and it seemed like that was going to be the next move for this team because, why wouldn't you want to pick up the third best well, not the third best, but the second best option on your team offensively, and especially when you made it so far into the Eastern Conference Finals. And he was consistently the team's best player in the 2024 playoffs as well. He averaged 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists and in the postseason, and he became only the third player to average 35 points and 10 rebounds in the first 2 games of the playoffs. Again, he was great for literally those 2 games, and he was, roughly the same kind of player in the postseason, but still like really valuable for the Pacers and the offense that they run, how quickly they run it. Elgin Baylor in 1961 and Wilt Chamberlain in 67. They were the only players to achieve this feat, and the 367 points that Siakam scored in the postseason was the most for an Indiana Pacers player since Paul George in 2014. So obviously some elite company that Siakam's in just off of one postseason performance. And, obviously Siakam, he is an NBA champion, and he is one of the, I wouldn't really say, I'd give him a little bit, like, I'd say he's a bit, before this season, he was a bit underrated. But now that he was, on the Pacers and on a much higher market and a better market than the Raptors, since, the Pacers were a lot better, he sort of got a lot more attention being on the Pacers, therefore making him not underrated anymore. And, because in my opinion, he was one of the league's underrated players, but now he's not one of the league's underrated players. He might be. Halliburton is definitely the most overrated player on his team, but Siakam, I don't really think Siakam got as much credit in the postseason as, Halliburton and the rest of the team. But I don't know. I didn't really hear much noise on Siakam, aside from the first 2 games. So the team now, it has their cornerstones locked in through 2028 and 2029, and the deal with Siakam signed is the second largest in their franchise history, behind the 5-year, $245 million rookie scale max contract that Halliburton signed last year. So, that's they have a really good duo over in Indiana. It's probably going to last for a really long time. And I mean, these 5 years, we'll have to see exactly what they're going to do with those 5 years. And let me know in the comments what you guys think is like up for the Pacers in the future. Do they make the finals? Do they win the finals? Or are they going to be like one of those teams that just makes it really far, or like that always makes the playoffs but just never gets past? Or are they going to be like the Clippers, dare I say? Or are they going to be like a team like the Boston Celtics, where it just takes them a very long time until they finally get that championship and they finally get over the hump? But we'll see. So with that, we are out of time for the second segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the third segment, see how long this drags on. But essentially what I'm going to do for the next 3 segments is talk about the top free agents that are going into the next NBA season. So I'm going to talk all about that in the third, the fourth, and the fifth segment, because there's like, I believe, 24 that I have on this list at least, but there might be more coming in soon, but we'll go ahead and see, like, it's depending on, player options and things like that right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about the top 24 free agents that are going into this off season. There's so many more free agents that are out there, and I have a huge list on them right here. And I took the top 25 that I've seen. Like, in my personal opinion, I took the top 25 out of all of these players on this list, and I went ahead and I just decided to write down my opinions on them and talk a little bit about them, what I think is going to happen to them in the future. And some of them I left off, and I'll talk a little bit about why I left some of these players off as well in these three segments, because I have a feeling that this segment is going to be much longer than a lot of the other segments. So I'm just going to have it as the third, the fourth, and the fifth segment, because I have a feeling it's just going to be that much longer. So let's just go right ahead and get ready to talk about the first free agent in the next season, and that is LeBron. Everyone's favorite player to hate, whatever you want to call it, the greatest basketball player of all time, no questions asked. And he is not going to be he's not going to be an unrestricted free agent going into this offseason, but he does have a player option. So it's like he could either take the player option or he could decline the player option and become an unrestricted free agent. So as of right now, he still has that player option available, and we'll have to see sort of how the draft goes, in my opinion, because there's a theory that LeBron is going to try and get on the same team that his son is going to play for, and that is probably the main reason as to why he even has that player option in the first place, so that way he could choose between either playing with his son or trying to get more championship rings, because there is also a report saying that the Lakers believe that they are in a position to be able to compete for the championship if they make the right moves in this free agency, if they make the right trades, all that kind of thing. Like, LeBron isn't going to try and get out of his situation in LA if he feels like the Lakers have an opportunity to win. So that's sort of the premise on LeBron and his and what he's going to decide to do. LeBron, he seems like a lock to elect free agency despite having a $51.4 million player option for next season. And a return to the Lakers, however, it does seem very plausible, but the added fact that, again, his son is going to get drafted in this draft, nobody is exactly quite sure of where he's going to go towards the end of this offseason. If he's going to follow his son, if he's not going to follow his son, that is still uncertain. LeBron averaged 25 points, 7 rebounds, and shot 50% from the field, 41% from three. This is the highest that he shot in his entire NBA career from the three-point line. I mean, he's the oldest player in the NBA, and he's shooting the best in his entire career. that is adapting his game. That is changing his game. We've seen all of these players. Hell, we've seen Al Horford, an NBA veteran, and he's been playing in the league for the longest time. He was there when the big men weren't supposed to shoot, and they were supposed to shoot mid ranges, and then he completely changed his game to the point where now he is known for his 3-point shooting and his corner shooting, and just being an elite all around defender as well, and being a spot up threat. That is really that's really what's going on right here with Al Horford, and the same thing that's going on with LeBron completely revamping his game. And we'll just have to see exactly what goes forth in the next season. So I talked a little bit more about LeBron than I should. Things happen. Boo-hoo. It's my segment. I can do what I want. So here we will go ahead and talk about Paul George. He is the next best free agent, and several other teams are very interested in him. The Knicks are interested in him. The Sixers seem to be really interested in him. And, the Sixers, they seem to be the best legitimate landing spot for Paul George. He also has a player option available from the Clippers. But again, it's going over to Philly, that seems to be the idea for Paul George. Recently in the NBA Finals, when Paul George made his first NBA Finals appearance as an announcer, he was also making a Finals appearance with Joel Embiid. And if you guys don't know, Joel Embiid is the best player on the 76ers, and that is the team that Paul George is expected to go to in free agency. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit of talking about teaming up with each other going into free agency. And, I'll explain a little bit as to why in later, because there are some other players on the Sixers that are also going to become free agents that I feel like the Sixers can deal without, and they can get rid of them and then replace them essentially with Paul George, because Paul George is going to be expecting a max contract from whichever team is interested in him, assuming that the Clippers cannot match that max contract, or the Clippers don't offer him a max contract. So he has plenty. He almost entered the 50-40-90 club this previous season. He averaged 47% from the field. That was really what was bringing him down, and shot 41% from 3 and 90% from the line. And it's clear that the 9-time All-Star can still be a number 1 or a number 2 option in the league on a contending roster, and his shot making ability and his perimeter defense would be a tremendous asset to any basketball organization. I personally think it's going to be the Sixers, but we'll see later on in the future, because the Knicks, they're also interested. I don't really think the Knicks are going to be able to get Paul George to go to New York, but given how there's already Jalen Brunson there, and maybe he doesn't want to team up with a guard, maybe he'll want to team up with a center, but we'll see. The next player that is going to be a free agent that I have on this list is Tyrese Maxey. He is going to be an unrestricted free agent this upcoming season. And, Maxey, it's most likely he's going to go back to the 76ers, despite the fact he's an unrestricted free agent. And Daryl Morey, he really wants to build the team around Maxey and Joel Embiid as the faces of the 76ers. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tyrese Maxey, he ends up, despite the fact that he is going to be an unrestricted, actually no, not an unrestricted free agent, a restricted free agent. Excuse me, my bad. He is a restricted free agent. He averaged 25 points per game, 45% from the field, and 37% from 3 with 6 assists as well. He is going to be, maybe a number 2 option at the very most, maybe even a number 3 option if Paul George ends up joining the 76ers. And he was a very good option in the postseason. He was a scorer. He was phenomenal. Despite the fact that they got absolutely owned by the New York Knicks, they were great. The two of them, they were great. And what kind of money should be expected from Maxey going into the future. Well, he made, this is surprising to me. He made $4.3 million last year off of just his contract with the Sixers. That is incredibly low, coming in like from a player that averaged 25 points per game. So I definitely feel like he's going to want to ask for more money in the future, and maybe if Paul George signs that extension, the Sixers might not have enough money to be able to sign him, give Embiid an extension, as well as give Maxey an extension. So, but then again, I have no idea. We'll have to see exactly whether or not they even get Paul George, and if they do get Maxey again, have to see how much. Have to see if Maxey is also, if he's willing to take a pay cut, because we've seen it that James Harden was willing to take a pay cut from the Sixers in hopes of getting better players to put them in a better position to win, even though that did nothing other than just make Harden lose more money. Really, that's the only thing that happened when he took the pay cut. He just didn't make the enough money, or as much money as he wanted to. So that's all I have for this third segment. So again, I'm going to just pivot over to the fourth segment where I continue with this topic, and it's basically just doing a break, and I'm going to continue with this topic on free agency because there is a whole lot more. I only talked about 3. So be sure to stay tuned for the next segment. I will be right back right after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. In this fourth segment, I'm going to continue on with my list of the top free agents going into the NBA offseason and their potential, what's probably going to happen to them, where they're going to end up going, things of that nature. So I am going to, continue on with this list and just go. Hold on just one second. Let me just try and find the. Oh, I don't have him on here. That's insane. That's my bad. One of the players that I completely forgot to add on this list was you guys are gonna be very surprised. It was OG Anunoby. I didn't know that I didn't have him added onto these pages. Hold on, give me 1 second and let me go ahead and put him in here. I'm very surprised that I didn't put him on here. I really didn't do that. That is horrible on my part. So anyways, you guys already know who the next player on the list is because, I just completely messed up. So the next player on the list is OG Anunoby. He was recently acquired from the New York Knicks via a trade. Definitely one of the best trades that the Knicks have done in recent history. It was fantastic. It was beautiful. It helped everyone. It made the entire team better, and it just gave good news. It gave great hope for New York. It was perfect example of a trade, and the perfect example of a trade that every single New York team should be doing. Brooklyn. And this trade, I'm just before I go on a little rant, it would have put the Knicks in the conference finals if the Knicks were healthy. I am fully confident on the fact that the Knicks would have made the conference finals if they were fully healthy. Now, he's earning, on his contract, he's earning roughly $20 million a year, 19.9. And, like, that doesn't really, he's obviously, like, a perfect fit for the New York Knicks. And it doesn't really seem like I don't think that's too much money to pay him, even though, there's several other players on the Knicks that definitely do need the money as well. They're also on this list. But I do think that, and not only that, especially since they do want to pursue Paul George, they are going to have to give up some of the players. But I genuinely think OG Anunoby is worth the roster spot, and it's worth all of that money. If they can unless getting Paul George is a guarantee, I don't think they should risk losing OG. I definitely don't. He has both the strength and the agility to guard basically anybody. He's 26 years old, and he's respectable outside of the three, which is really important, especially like if your main asset is defense. Being a reliable three-point shooter, it goes a long way. And again, he's just so good on the defense, and he's incredibly valuable. I think that New York should try and get him as soon as they can. Now, next player on this list is James Harden. James Harden was a shell of himself than he was and I should mention before, OG, he had a player option so he definitely could accept the player option and play for the Knicks again. And going into the next season, which I really do think is going to be the move for the Knicks. I hope, obviously, he's going to have to accept the player option, but I think that's going to be his best move. So next is James Harden. He also has a player option for the Los Angeles Clippers. This is one of the lowest scoring seasons for James Harden in a while. He is way past his prime and way past definitely not the same player that we remember from previous seasons, dropping 30 points in every single game, dropping triple doubles in every other game, and shooting his step back threes, hitting his step back threes, all of that, just being the reliable point guard and the shooting guard that he actually was. And this is, despite that, however, this is the first season in the NBA in his entire career where he ended up elevating his play in the postseason as opposed to his play, like compared to his play in the regular season. He shot better from the field in the playoffs. He shot better from three in the playoffs as well, and he also ended up scoring more points in the playoffs as well. That is the only thing that's saving him, because one of the biggest stipulations around Harden is the fact that he is one of the worst playoff performers in NBA history. I'm going to go into that segment in another podcast, probably a podcast tomorrow, where I talk about James Harden and how now he is the new leader for the most games played in the postseason without winning a championship. And I'll talk a little bit about that and why it's like his playoff performance has just always been bad. But he has a player option. I wouldn't be surprised if the Clippers take it, especially seeing as but the big problem is that he might decline it if Paul George doesn't go back to the Clippers. So because James Harden is at that point in his career where he really wants a championship and he wants to win it now. And if he feels that the team isn't good enough to win a championship, he's gone. He's been traded several times recently in the previous years, and the only times where he was happy with the situation he was in was when he was competing for a championship. So that's that. Now, the next player on this list is Emmanuel Quickley, and he was traded to the New York Knicks, and he's making $4.2 million right now, but his averages are really good for someone who's making only $4.2 million. 17 points, 43% from the field, 39% from three, and 85% from the free throw line. And the only problem is that his turnovers were kind of bad when he moved over to Toronto. But aside from that, he's been a really good piece for the team. He is going to be a restricted free agent for the Raptors, so I'm pretty sure he's just going to re-sign with them. No big deal. Next player I do want to get into a little bit more is DeMar DeRozan. He is, playing for the Chicago Bulls. He averaged 24 points, 33% from the three-point line, 48% from the field, and 85% from the free throw. I said three-point line with 33%, by the way. And DeMar, he mentioned openness to re-sign with the Bulls, but it's tough to really, imagine the 34-year-old returning to Chicago with so many questions surrounding the fact that the Bulls just aren't really a competing team. For the entire time that DeMar has been on the Chicago Bulls, they've been nothing but mediocre. And part of that might have to do with the fact that Zach LaVine keeps getting injured. Part of that might just have to, and the other part might just have to do with the fact that the rest of the players just aren't that good. But DeMar is not really, he has not been the same kind of popular player that he was in Canada with Toronto. And he wasn't, the same, I don't know what it is. It's just he's mid. Everything about him is just mediocre. And there's, I don't think he should resign. I think he's wasting his time over there. I feel like he should go to a completely different team. His play style is very, very odd and very weird, in my opinion, for this era, because relying on mid-range shots and not being able to hit that efficiently from the three-point line while being a shooting guard is not that ideal. Now, he's gotten better, but, how much is better? Not a lot. So that's all I have, for DeMar, and, I really feel like he should join a completely different team. Now, next player on this list, who I regret is an unrestricted free agent, is Claxton. Now, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. He's one of my favorite players on the team. He averaged 11 points, 9 rebounds, shot 62% from the field, wasn't a really good free throw shooter, wasn't a really good three-point shooter, but he was a great rebounder, great defender, and, a reliable scorer when you needed him to, to operate the pick and rolls. It worked out great. Maybe if Cam Thomas wasn't such a ball hog, he'd be able to get more touches. But that's beside the point. Speaking of Cam Thomas, it seemed that Claxton and Cam, they didn't really, click the same way in terms of basketball, visuals. There was a time when Claxton really wanted Cam Thomas to throw him a lob since he was wide open in the paint, but Cam Thomas ended up shooting the three. He ended up making the three, but Claxton was upset, which I don't really understand. If you miss the shot, yes, you can be upset. If you make the shot, I don't feel like you should be upset, because you're essentially scoring more points hitting that shot than you were if you were to actually pass the ball, which puts your team in a better position to win. So I don't really agree with the fact that Claxton was, crying at that, but he's 6'11". He is a very valuable center. Now, he's not really that buff, but he is relatively lanky for a center, and for his wingspan is really good, and it's really long. So I really don't want him to leave the Nets, but I really do feel like that he's not going to try and stay with Brooklyn, given the situation that Brooklyn is under right now, and given the state of where the franchise is. I don't think he's going to want to be a part of this. Next player on this list is Malik Monk. We're now sort of going down to where not the big time player names. We're going down to the mid tier, not really the very good player tier, I guess you could say. The good player tier. That's where we're going into. Before we were in all-star player tier, and now we're in the good player tier. And you could argue that maybe Quickly and James Harden are in the very good tier, because James Harden isn't really an all-star anymore. But regardless, you do what you will with that. Malik Monk, he was in the running for the Sixth Man of the Year, and one of the popular spots that seems to be ringing a bell with Malik Monk is the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, that seems to be a team that is the favorite of acquiring him. Now, he didn't win the Sixth Man of the Year, but that doesn't mean that he's not a very valuable player coming off of the bench. He's making $9.9 million this year. He averaged 19 points, 44% from the field, 35% from three, and 5 assists. Again, he was mainly, supposed to be the scorer off the bench. And being such a young player, he's 26 years old, I really feel like he would also be able to mesh relatively well with the other players on the OKC roster. So, with that, we are out of time for this fourth segment. So now we will go ahead and we will continue with the fourth segment after this short break. And we will continue talking about the rest of the free agents or the top free agents that are going into the NBA, going into NBA summer and NBA's free agency. And we rattled off 9 players, so now we will go ahead and rattle off a few more players in the final segment. So I will be right back after this break. Be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we are going to be continuing on with the list of NBA free agents that that are going to be or the top free agents going into the summer. Pardon me for my horrible English right there. So we left off with Malik Monk, so now we will go ahead and move on to the next player, which is KCP. And I feel like getting KCP now, he has a player option, but KCP, he needs to accept his player option if the Nuggets, they have a chance of winning another NBA championship. Now, they messed up against the Timberwolves this year. However, they still have the same roster that they do have going into the next season and the same championship roster. So if KCP just accepts his player option, they can easily try and run it back one more time and hopefully not lose earlier in the postseason than they did the previous year. But, that's up to KCP and we'll see. Next player on this list, I'm trying to go through this list as quickly as possible. And we are coming up like some of the mediocre players, I guess you could say. So it's like not really, again, it's a very, very big class of free agent players, and it's like not everyone is a top player in the league, unfortunate as it is. This is just my opinion. So next is D'Lo. He is, he played for the Lakers. He did not have a very good season in the postseason, I should say. He did not have a very good postseason, but he did play really well in the regular season, And, that postseason performance, it was just, one or 4, 5 bad games. Like, it was a sample size of 5 games, and it wasn't like he played really well in those 5 games. And it's like, he's making $17.3 million, and he does have a player option. I have a feeling he's going to accept his player option, even though the Lakers might not want him on the team after selling like he did. I mean, like, he was just horrible in the playoffs. It was bad, and I don't even want to talk about him anymore. Let's move on to the next guy, and next up is Miles Bridges. I don't want to talk about him. Next is Tobias Harris. Now, I will definitely talk about Tobias Harris. Now, he is under fire under the Sixers media. He is definitely one of the scapegoats for the loss between the Knicks and the Sixers. Tobias Harris was historically bad in the postseason, and it was bad. It was just atrocious. Like, he was a non-factor in several games in the postseason, and it was almost as if, like, he wasn't there, and it was like he just didn't help the team, like, at all. I'm just pulling up his game log right now, but, like, I don't remember him contributing anything in the postseason, and I believe he dropped 0 points in an elimination game. Let me just go ahead and make sure. Yep, he ended the game 0 for 2 in an elimination game in between the Knicks, and he had 7 points in game 1 and 8 points in game 3. And the most points he scored was 19 points. Now, this is definitely like a player that the Sixers don't want to be spending so much money on. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent going into the next season, and I think the team should just I think the Sixers should just let him walk. Like, after that terrible performance, and they need to let him walk. Otherwise, I don't really think they're going to have enough money to be able to convince Paul George to join the Sixers. Which brings up the next player on this list that's most likely going to also be let off by the Sixers is Buddy Hield. Like, the Sixers, they aren't going to pursue him in free agency, I don't think. If they have a chance, if Paul George does end up, declining to go with the Clippers. Now, Buddy Hield, he's, known as a 3-point shooter, but he shot 38% from 3, not bad, averaged 12 points, but no players drained more threes than Hield over the previous 5 seasons, and he was 15th in the association's last season with 219 triples. So, again, another just a great role player that is coming in for the Sixers, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Sixers end up letting him go in the hopes of being able to get Paul George. Again, that is the big dream, to have a big 3 in the Eastern Conference, to be able to compete against the Big C. Oh, well, that was horrible, but let me know in the comments what you guys think. Now, Klay Thompson, he is most likely going to test the free agent market. I've talked about him several times on this podcast, and being under contract for $43.2 million and expecting to test the free agency market while looking for similar compensation is going to be a very hard task, especially with the numbers that he is averaging. That is all I really need to say. If you guys want to really listen to what I have to say about Klay Thompson, you can go ahead and watch some of the other podcasts about Klay Thompson or the individual episodes I do have about him. Now, next is Tyus Jones. Now, he was one of the only bright spots, in my opinion, for the Wizards. Now, it really is unfortunate that the Wizards, they're paying Jordan Poole all that money, and Jordan Poole isn't really as impactful as I feel like as this player. There is a chance that the Wizards end up giving him a lot more money because he is an unrestricted free agent going into the next season, but making more than Jordan Poole or making as much, I don't think so. I wouldn't be surprised. I would leave, honestly. I would I would suggest leaving and maybe joining a team like the Spurs, so that way you can play with Victor Wembanyama, something like that. Definitely a better option than playing with Jordan Poole. But next is Jonas Valanciunas. Now, he ranks 6th in total rebounds and 7th in double-doubles since being acquired from the Grizzlies in 2021. And he has, his limitations as a defender, but he's developed a great three-point shot. He's shooting 30% from three. As a center, that's pretty good. And he's been, a pretty good presence for the Pelicans towards the middle. Now, the Pelicans, they are kind of looking for a rim protector, so I'm not entirely sure how Jonas's contract is going to hold up. He's making $15.4 million this year, but we'll go ahead and we'll see how whether or not they decide to take the team in a different direction than taking the team in the direction of having the what's it called? The option of having the a rim protector as opposed to having him. But we'll go ahead and we'll see what they do. Coming in from the sports, TJ says Jones deserves better than the Wizards. Love the idea of him on the Spurs. Wemby needs a real point guard. Thank you for agreeing with that. I feel like that's sort of in his budget, and definitely also in the Spurs budget, because it's really difficult to convince. It would be really difficult to convince a big time free agent to be able to, especially when there aren't really that many big time free agents, if you really think about it, going into this offseason that are young enough and in a good enough spot to compete with Wemby. So, but next on this list is Isaiah Hartenstein, and this is one that is it's going to hurt a lot of New York fans because he does a lot of the grit and he does a lot of the things that a lot of players don't really want to do. And, he brings that value to the team. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. And, again, OKC seems to be the landing spot for a player like this. And it seems they're going to try and pursue him. Another player that gets known for doing all of the dirty work is Bruce Brown, former Nets legend. Love the guy, great player, fantastic rebounder, fantastic offensive mind. He won the NBA championship with the Denver Nuggets. He was a very important piece to that puzzle, a 3-and-D player. He's making $22 million, however, which is a lot. That is a lot of money coming in from Bruce Brown. And, he's under a team option, which is really rare. And I believe he's the first player on the list that I've mentioned that is on a team option. And he's reportedly, the franchise is reportedly set to trade him around the draft after picking up his $23 million in salary for 2024 and the 2025 season. The club has until June 29 to officially exercise the option, and that seems to be the next we'll figure out exactly where he's going to be traded, but that seems to be the next step for him. Next is Royce O'Neal. Now, I mentioned him before in the previous podcast, saying that he would be a pretty good option to pair up with Kyrie and Luka Doncic, seeing as how the Mavericks, they're still in need of if they want to increase their role player option, and if they want to maybe get a better role player, maybe Royce O'Neal would be the pick, because they don't need star players. They need better role players now. So that's an option. He's making only $9.5 million, and his averages aren't really all that, but, he is a 3-and-D defender, so I don't really expect your averages to be all that. Next is the one and only light-skin himself, Kelly Oubre. He is, a fan favorite for the ladies, and seriously, look at the demographics, and, look at his face. But pause. Aside from that, he's played he's on a minimum deal with only $2 million. I don't know what teams they might pick him up, and they I don't know what it is. It's weird. He's been jumping from team to team, and he's primarily a defensive wing, and he's very efficient around the basket. So it's I wouldn't be surprised if people would take that for $2 million. $2 million and averaging 15 points per game is pretty impressive, I will say. But then again, there is the inefficiencies that come with that. So next on this list, we are running down through this list. We have Gary Trent, and oh my God, I completely forgot to put another player, and the other player that I forgot to put was Obi Toppin. He's also going to be a free agent coming into the next season. And he's going to be a restricted free agent, however, so I really feel like the Pacers are going to want to re-sign him again. So an unrestricted free agent is Gary Trent Jr. He is going to he has a slightly diminished role with the Raptors in the last few seasons, despite the fact that he's making $18.6 million. And he's a good defender. He's a pretty good shooter as well, shooting 39% from three. So he's an unrestricted free agent. Wouldn't be surprised if any championship team would want to get him on the roster. Next on this list, we are reaching the very end, is Markelle Fultz. Now, yes, I have Markelle Fultz over Russell Westbrook. And, he's had his knee injuries, obviously, and he's, in 158 contests over the last 4 years, he's averaged 12 points, 5 assists. He's also much, much younger, which is the big reason why I put him over Westbrook. And not only that, Westbrook is not after Markelle Fultz either. It is Luke Kennard. Now, I feel like Luke Kennard, he brings a lot more value to the team than he also has the team option, so we'll go ahead and see exactly what they do. But he shoots 45% from the three-point line, which is really where his value comes from. He's a great three-point shooter, and he's a great wing player as, he enters free agency dependent on what the Grizzlies do in the draft. So we'll go ahead and see exactly what will happen and what is expected to happen going into free agency and going into the draft and everything of that nature. There are other players that I haven't mentioned before. There was also Kyle Lowry, who is also an unrestricted free agent. There are also some there are also some other players that are also on different deals that I didn't bother mentioning, like PJ Tucker. He does have that player option. Also Nick Batum, Talon Horton-Tucker, James Wiseman. Let me see who else on the list. Jeff Green, Daniel Tice, Mason Plumlee, Westbrook, Kevin Love. All of these players, they all have a player option, and I didn't really bother Andre Drummond. I didn't really bother, including them because I didn't feel like they belonged on a list that was, full of, some of the best players. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you feel like I missed out on some of these free agents, if there were some other sleeper picks that I may have missed out on, and I'll go ahead and look at them. But with that out of the way, we are out of time for all of the segments and the 5th segment of the show. So that is it for the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCPodcast.net. Really helps your show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, really helps the show. Link is GSMCPodcast.net. That is all I have for you in this in this 5th and final segment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great.